Hey everybody, Aaron Mac BS Detector. It has been quite a few days since I've come on and yapped for a minute. So it's like the wee hours of Monday morning. Sundays are for being horizontal. Um, I know I've mentioned my job. I bartend and I just go hard 3 nights in a row and then that's it. So yeah, Sundays I don't do shit. Like I don't do anything. Please excuse my hair. Please excuse my face. I did do a little bit of cool eyeshadow. Put some lip gloss on so I wouldn't look completely dead. And I thought I did a good job of covering my under eye bags, but maybe it's the ring light. I don't know. Whatever. Okay, so I'm trying to decide whether I want to start reading. I think I am. I think I'm going to just go ahead and get right back into this because if I'm not reading to you guys, and I'll try for the sake of also because I've said, I have multiple interests. Facts being one, perfumes being another, and bartending, bar related whatnot, makeup, skincare, just life stuff. I don't have any kids. I love dogs. Anyways, I don't even know why I'm going off on that rant. So after much deliberation, actually, it wasn't much deliberation. I just kind of decided, hell, I feel like we're basically laying some bricks down, like brick by brick. We're going to form a little path that's going to lead right to certain people. And my boss actually the other day was like, be careful. I mean, because he knows and I know. And I'm not trying to tell anybody to do anything crazy. I just want people to know what the hell is actually going on, because knowing your enemy isn't that G.I. Joe, real American hero type stuff? Like, I don't know, it seems like something G.I. And remember, kids, know your enemy. And then in the cartoon, I don't know, he probably never did say that. But okay, so I'm going to read you the synopsis of the book on the back. That way, before I get started, you can decide if you want to sit here and listen to me. And this is going to take a considerable amount of time because this is twice as long as any of the other two that we've read. So we're taking on bigger and bigger endeavors here, but we're going to do it because this is for educational and commentary purposes. I'm not just sitting here reading the dang book and not commenting on things, okay? I have thoughts and opinions that go along with these books and this published media. So, anyways, the back of the book cover says, this book traces the history of the ancient Khazar Empire, a major but almost forgotten power in Eastern Europe. Remember that. Which in the Dark Ages became converted to Judaism. Khazaria was finally wiped out by the forces of Genghis Khan, but evidence indicates that the Khazars themselves migrated to Poland and formed the cradle of Western Jewry. To the general reader, the Khazars, who flourished from the 7th to the 11th century, may seem infinitely remote today. Yet they have a close and unexpected bearing on our world, which emerges as Koestler recounts the fascinating history of the ancient Khazar Empire. It's about time that at about the time that Charlemagne was emperor in the West, the Khazar sway extended from the Black Sea to the Caspian, from the Caucasus, remember that term, which was a set of mountains, Caucasus Mountains, to the Volga, which was a river, I do believe. And they were instrumental in stopping the Muslim onslaught against Byzantium, which little seasoned people, we kind of think Byzantium might have been Jesus's millennial reign, but That's for just very niche topic enjoyers. Okay. And they were instrumental in stopping the Muslims of the Byzantium, the eastern jaw of the gigantic pincher movement that in the west swept across northern Africa and into Spain. Thereafter, the Khazars found themselves in a precarious position between the two major world powers, the Eastern Roman Empire and Byzantium, and the triumphant followers of Muhammad. As Koestler points out, the Khazars were the third world of their day. They chose a surprising method of resisting both Western pressure to become Christian and Eastern to adopt Islam. Rejecting both, they converted to Judaism, okay? Which is not Old Testamentism, okay? It's a whole different religion unto itself. And it has nothing to do with Judeans or Hebrews or anything like that. And that's where the mindfuck begins. All right. So, after rejecting both Christianity and Islam, they converted to Judaism. So, these Caucasians, basically, I think they're like Turkic, Asiatic Mongols or something is like technically their pheno whatever type. I don't even know. I don't know even what words mean. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but whatever. You know what I'm saying. Okay. So Mr. Koestler speculates about the ultimate faith of the Khazars and their impact on the racial composition and social heritage of modern Jewry. Okay. He produces detailed research to support a theory which could make the term anti-Shemitism become void of meaning. Now, isn't that weird that this is the second, actually, no, the third, because I think they even mentioned in the Shemayanism, a basic reader book, that, people trying to overuse a term or misuse the term or making it devoid of its meaning. It's like, well, it is meaningless. I mean, because no one are Semites now. Okay, all that genealogy stuff was destroyed in 70 AD. Nobody has any idea who anybody is. So these are some jumping off points that we need to establish to know who these people are trying to be and why. Like, what is it? You can trace everything literally probably going on in the world back to these freaking people. But you're somehow friggin' racist or something if you, and it's like they're white basically. They're Eastern European white people, and some people probably think that I am because I know I got a big nose, but I don't know. I'm not. To my knowledge, I'm not. I've never gotten a DNA test, and I never will. But I was raised Protestant Christian, which now I just realized is a protesting Catholic. So, anyways, and then there's just some little, reviews. All right. This is called The 13th Tribe, The Khazar Empire and Its Heritage by Arthur Koestler. Okay. And then we have a little map here. So there's the Byzantine Empire, the Black Sea, Khazaria. Okay. Hungary's over here. Bulgars. I don't know who the Bulgars are. There's Armenia right there. Oh, God. I'm okay. Sorry. You guys, I'm sorry. Okay. So there is the Black Sea. There's Byzantium. Armenia is right there. And I find that really interesting because I watch Signal Before Silence, and she's Armenian. And she talks about the huge role that the Armenians have had even since like ancient times in Christendom. So I find that to be very interesting, and I'm probably going to be doing some more research on that here on the channel once I get a more high-tech setup, obviously. Let's see. Azerbaijan. Can you see? Okay, sorry. I'm like trying to look at it and then also Bertas. So yeah, which are the Caucasus Mountains? That's what I'd like to know. Where's the Caucasus? That might be it. I don't know. Whatever. This is dead air and it's boring. I'm sorry. Let me get to reading. Okay. This is for educational and commentary purposes only. I am using fair use. Okay. This is for educational purposes. This is chapter 1. It's titled Rise. About the time when Charlemagne was crowned Emperor of the West, the eastern confines of Europe between the Caucasus and the Volga were ruled by a Jayish state known as the Khazar Empire. At the peak of its power, from the 7th to the 10th centuries AD, it played a significant part in shaping the destinies of medieval and consequently of modern Europe. The Byzantine emperor and historian Constantine Porphyrogenitus must have been well aware of this when he recorded in his treatise on court protocol. And there's a footnote, but I don't see it, so we'll skip it for right now. That letters addressed to the Pope in Rome, and similarly to those to the Emperor of the West, had a gold seal worth 2 solidi attached to them, whereas messages to the King of the Khazars displayed a C worth 3 solidi. This was not flattery, but realpolitik. Quote, in the period with which we are concerned, end quote, wrote Bury, it is probable that the Khan of the Khazars was of little less importance in view of the imperial foreign policy than Charles the Great and his successors. And then there's another footnote. The country of the Khazars, a people of Turkish stock, occupied a strategic key position at the vital gateway between the Black Sea and the Caspian, where the great eastern powers of the period confronted each other. It acted as a buffer, protecting Byzantium against invasions by lusty barbarian tribesmen of the northern steppes, Bulgars, Magyars, Pechenegs, etc., and later the Vikings and the Russians. But equally or even more important, both from the point of view of the Byzantine diplomacy and European history, is the fact that the Khazar enemies effectively blocked the Arab avalanche in its most devastating early stages, and thus prevented the Muslim conquest of Eastern Europe. Professor Dunlop of Columbia University, a leading authority on the history of the Khazars, has given a concise summary of this decisive yet virtually unknown episode. So, unknown history. Very important to learn the real history of things, friends. And I think that by reading some of the writings of these actual Jays and Kabbalists, they tell you out of their own mouths, like their plans, who they think they are, what they're planning on doing with the future. I mean, it's time that we take stuff serious here. Stop caring so much about, I know the World Cup brought everybody together, yada yada. Okay, great. I'm glad. And I'm also glad that like a lot of people from other places came and realized America doesn't suck as bad as everybody has been told that it does. Are all of our governments of the world corrupt and totally suck? Yes. But this country is still freer than any other country on the face of the planet. With maybe the exception of a few, I don't know, maybe some of the, like, what is it, Uruguay or somewhere? They're pretty, I don't even know what I'm talking about. Let me shut up and get back to reading. Okay. So this is the virtually unknown episode that we're about to read about. All right. The Khazar country lay across the natural line of advance of the Arabs. Within a few years of the death of Muhammad, AD 632, the armies of the Caliphate, sweeping northward through the wreckage of 2 empires and carrying all before them, reached the great mountain barrier of the Caucasus. This barrier once passed, the road lay open to the lands of Eastern Europe. As it was on the line of the Caucasus, the Arabs met the forces of an organized military power, which effectively prevented them from extending their conquest in this direction. The wars of the Arabs and the Khazars, which lasted more than 100 years, though little known, have thus considerable historical importance. The Franks of Charles Martel on the field of Tours turned the tide of Arab invasion. At about the same time, the threat to Europe in the east was hardly less acute. The victorious Muslims were met and held by the forces of the Khazar kingdom. It can scarcely be doubted that but for the existence of the Khazars in the region of north of the Caucasus, Byzantium, the bulwark for Europe of European civilization in the east, would have found itself outflanked by the Arabs, and the history of Christendom and Islam might well have been very different from what we know. It is perhaps not surprising, given these circumstances, that in 732, after a resounding Khazar history over the Arabs, the future emperor Constantine V, married a Khazar princess. In due time, their son became the Emperor Leo the Fourth, known as Leo the Khazar. Ironically, the last battle in the war, AD 737, ended in a Khazar defeat. But by that time, the impetus of the Muslim Holy War was spent. The caliphate was rocked by internal dissensions, and the Arab invaders retraced their steps across the Caucasus without having gained a permanent foothold in the north, whereas the Khazars became more powerful than they had previously been. A few years later, probably around 740 AD, the king, his court, and the military ruling class embraced the Jewish faith, and Judaism became the state religion of the Khazars. No doubt their contemporaries were as astonished by this decision as modern scholars were when they came across the evidence in the Arab, Byzantine, Russian, and Hebrew sources. One of the most recent comments is to be found in a work by the Hungarian Marxist historian Dr. Antal Barta in his book on the Magyar society in the 8th and 9th centuries. Has several chapters on the Khazars, as during most of that period the Hungarians were ruled by them. Yet their conversion to Judaism is discussed in a single paragraph with obvious embarrassment. It reads, "Our investigations cannot go into problems pertaining to the history of ideas, but we must call the reader's attention to the matter of the Khazar kingdom's state religion. It was the Jewish faith which became the official religion of the ruling strata of society. Needless to say, the acceptance of the Jewish faith as the state religion of an ethnically non-Jewish people could be the subject of interesting speculations." You don't say. We shall, however, confine ourselves to the remark that this official conversion, in defiance of Christian proselytizing by Byzantium, the Muslim influence from the East, and in spite of the political pressure of these two powers, to a religion which had no support from any political power, but was persecuted by nearly all, has come as a surprise to all historians concerned with the Khazars, and cannot be considered as accidental, but must be regarded as a sign of the independent policy pursued by that kingdom. And they're still pursuing, you guys. Nothing has changed. World domination is the goal, bro. Okay, let's see. Which leaves us only slightly more bewildered than before, yet whereas the sources differ in minor detail, the major facts are beyond dispute. Isn't this interesting what you find out when you read books? What is in dispute is the fate of the Jewish Khazars after the destruction of their empire in the 12th or 13th century. On this problem, the sources are scant, but various late medieval Khazar settlements are mentioned in the Crimea, in the Ukraine, in Hungary, Poland, and Lithuania. The general picture that emerges from these fragmentary pieces of information is that a migration of Khazar tribes and communities into those regions of Eastern Europe, mainly Russia and Poland, where at the dawn of the modern age, the greatest concentrations of Jews were found. This has led several historians to conjecture that a substantial part, and perhaps the majority of Eastern Jews, and hence of world Jewry, might be of Khazar and not Semitic origin. We're on page 16, guys, and truth bombs are already falling down. They're not Semitic. Oh my God. I've been saying this for like 10 years. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to. I'm sorry. I hope everybody picks up like on my sense of humor and my snark. I'm not trying to be like a know-it-all or like a butthole about anything to anybody. I love everybody. I just want people to realize what's really going on, dude. And if you like being read to or yapped to, sub to the channel and you can learn something along the way. I mean, you might have to hear me butt in and interrupt every so often, but I have to do that for the sake of commentary purposes, fair use, and really I do want to do commentary on these kinds of topics. Okay, so we have just established that the Semitic origin of these claiming to be Jays, but are not, but are the Shmenagog of Shmatan. That's in question here. Okay, so the far-reaching implications of this hypothesis may explain the great caution exercised by historians in approaching this subject, if they do not avoid it altogether. Yeah, because they don't want to be called anti-Shemitic. Thus, in the 1973 edition of the Encyclopedia Judaica, the article, quote, Khazars is signed by Dunlop, but there is a separate section dealing with, quote, Khazar Jews after the fall of the kingdom, end quote, signed by the editors and written with the obvious intent to avoid upsetting believers in the dogma of the chosen race. Corey, Smart Christian Channel, I'm going to at you, bro, because you need to wake up and realize the people that are inhabiting the geopolitical land called Israel are not the same people from the Bible. And if you would pick up a book, you didn't even have to get into the second chapter and it's already told you who they are. They're not Semitic at all. And you kept muting me on your live because I was saying this. So either you are that brainwashed or you're working for some Shmianists. So riddle me that, Batman. Anyways, yeah. So we don't want to avoid the believers of the chosen race theory. Okay, we don't want to upset them because they might kill you. I mean, I'm sorry, unalive you. Anyways, okay. Now there's like a kind of a colon and then an idea break, I guess. The Turkish-speaking Karaites, a fundamentalist Jewish sect of the Crimea, Poland, and elsewhere, have affirmed a connection with the Khazars, which is perhaps confirmed by evidence from folklore and anthropology as well as language. There seems to be a considerable amount of evidence attesting to the continued presence in Europe of descendants of the Khazars. Well, yeah, no shit. How important in quantitative terms is that, quote, presence of the Caucasian sons of Japheth, not Shem, in the tents of Shem. Okay. How important in qualitative terms is that, quote, presence of the, quote, Caucasian sons in the tents of Shem? Of the most radical propounders of the hypothesis concerning the Khazar origins of J. Uri is the professor of medieval Jewish history at Tel Aviv University, A.N. Polyak. His book, Khazaria in Hebrew, was published in 1944 in Tel Aviv and a second edition in 1951. In his introduction, he writes that the facts demand a new approach, both to the problem of the relations between the Khazar J. Uri and the other Jewish communities, and to the question of how far we can go in regarding this Khazar J. Uri as a nucleus of the large Jewish settlement in Eastern Europe. The descendants of this settlement, those who stayed where they were, those who emigrated to the United States and to other countries, and those who went to Israel, constitute now the large majority of world J. Uri. And they're not Semites, bro. Get the net, Corey. This was written before the full extent of the Holocaust was known, but that does not alter the fact that the large majority of surviving Jays in the world is of Eastern European and thus perhaps mainly of Khazar origin. If so, this would mean that their ancestors came not from the Jordan but from the Volga, and not from Canaan but from the Caucasus, which would make them Caucasians. Okay? I'm so sick of people calling random white people Caucasians. That's literally like calling all black people Africans. Not all black people come from Africa, bro. There are indigenous brown people on every continent. Look at Australia. Look here. I think even Japan has like some like melanated indigenous people. I'm Anglo-Saxon, thank you very much. Don't you dare call me a Caucasian. Anyways. All right, where were we? All right, yeah. Okay. And here's the thing, too. It says, they're not from the Jordan, but from the Volga, and not from Canaan, but from the Caucasus. It says, once believed to be the cradle of the Aryan race. And Schmittler, the Austrian painter, was also a J. Okay. So this little kindergarten pretend history that we've been taught is bullshit. And that's what I'm here to detect, friends. I wish I had like some effects. I could be like, and do the bling wink. Anyways, sorry, I'm corny. Okay, and that genetically they were more closely related to the Hun, Uyghur, and Magyar tribes than to the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Should this turn out to be the case, then the term Schmanti-Schmitism would become void of meaning, and it is. Based on the misapprehension shared by both the unalivers and their victims, the story of the Khazar Empire as it slowly emerges from the past begins to look like the cruelest hoax. The cruelest hoax which history has ever perpetrated. And that's what I'm trying to say here, dude. Is like, this is one of the biggest, this lie right here has more of an effect on literally every aspect of our everyday lives, down to like literally every single detail of your life. Every single detail of your life. Your entertainment, your job, the money, the social climate, the political ideas, the media that's thrown at you. Like, it's all. They have their hands in all of it. Molding your head. I mean, I think they invented modern psychiatry. And probably, definitely Western allopathic medicine as well. Okay. So, I mean, and this if there was ever some bullshit to be detected, friends, this here is the main point. I don't want to say of this channel because I'm of the belief that all truth matters, but more people have to wake up to this particular fact, because it is a historical fact that none of us have been taught, and that a lot of people are very confused about. Okay. Their church has told them that these people in this land that they call Israel or whatever is the same thing from the Bible. It's not, dudes. It's not. And this right here is telling you that. They're completely different people that converted to, I don't even think the practice of, well, I mean, maybe they did do Torah, but I think they actually adopted it more for the mystical part of it, the Talmud, and like probably the Kabbalah or whatever. But nevertheless, I'm just going to keep on keeping on. All right. This is chapter 2, and this is in quotes. Attila was, after all, merely the king of a kingdom of tents. His state passed away, whereas the despised city of Constantinople remained a power. The tents vanished, the towns remained. The Hun state was a whirlwind, end quote. I wonder if they were the Pikeys. Never mind. Thus, Koestler, a 19th century Orientalist, implying that the Khazars shared, for similar reasons, a similar fate, yet the Hun presence on the European scene lasted a mere 80 years. From circa 372, when the Huns first started to move westward from the steppes north of the Caspian, to the death of Attila in 453. Whereas the kingdom of the Khazars held its own for the best part of 4 centuries. They too lived chiefly in tents, but they also had large urban settlements and were in the process of transformation from a tribe of nomadic warriors into a nation of farmers, cattle breeders, fishermen, vine growers, traders, and skilled craftsmen. Soviet archaeologists have unearthed evidence for a relatively advanced civilization which was altogether different from the quote Hun whirlwind, end quote. They found the traces of villages extending over several miles, with houses connected by galleries to huge cattle sheds, sheep pens, and stables. These measured 3 by 3.5 by 10 to 14 meters and were supported by columns. Some remaining ox plows showed remarkable craftsmanship. So did the preserved artifacts, buckles, clasps, ornamental saddle plates. Of particular interest were the foundations sunk into the ground of the houses built in a circular shape. According to the Soviet archaeologists, these were found all over the territories inhabited by the Khazars, and were of an earlier date than their normal rectangular buildings. Obviously, the round houses symbolize the transition from portable, dome-shaped tents to permanent dwellings, from the nomadic to the settled, or rather semi-settled existence. For the contemporary Arab sources tell us that the Khazars only stayed in their towns, including even their capital, Itil, during the winter. Come spring, they packed their tents, left their houses, and sallied forth with their sheep or cattle into the steppes, or camped in their cornfields or vineyards. The excavations also showed that the kingdom was during its later periods surrounded by an elaborate chain of fortifications dating from the 8th and 9th centuries, which protected its northern frontiers facing open the steppes. These fortresses formed a rough semicircle arc from the Crimea, and this is in parentheses, which the Khazars ruled for a time, across the lower reaches of the Donets and the Don to the Volga, while towards the south they were protected by the Caucasus, to the west by the Black Sea, and to the east by the quote Khazar Sea, the Caspian, and then there's an asterisk, so we'll read that. To this day, the Muslims, recalling the Arab terror of the Khazar raids, still call the Caspian a sea as shifting as the nomads and washing to their steppeland parts. And that was from Bahr ul Khazar, the Khazar Sea, which was written in a history of the Georgian people. The Georgian people. See, now I'm glad that they're putting names to this stuff so I can like dig a little deeper. Okay, however, the northern chain of fortifications marked merely an inner ring, protecting the stable core of the Khazar country. The actual boundaries of their rule over the tribes of the north fluctuated according to the fortunes of war. At the peak of their power, they controlled or exacted tribute from some 30 different nations and tribes inhabiting the vast territories between the Caucasus, the Aral Sea, the Ural Mountains, the town of Kiev, and the Ukrainian steppes. The people under Khazar suzerainty included the Bulgars, Burtas, Gus, Magyars, which are the Hungarians, the Gothic and Greek colonies of the Crimea, and the Slavonic tribes in the northwestern woodlands. Beyond these extended dominions, Khazar armies also raided Georgia and Armenia and penetrated into the Arab Caliphate as far as Mosul. In the words of the Soviet archaeologist M.I. Artamanov. God, why was that so hard to say? Until the 9th century, the Khazars had no rivals to their supremacy in the regions north of the Black Sea and the adjoining steppe and the forest regions of the Dnieper. The Khazars were supreme masters of the southern half of Eastern Europe for a century and a half and presented a mighty bulwark, blocking the Ural-Caspian gateway from Asia into Europe. During this whole period, they held back the onslaught of the nomadic tribes from the east. Taking a bird's eye view of this history of the great nomadic empires of the East, the Khazar kingdom occupies an intermediary position in time, size, and degree of civilization between the Hun and Avar empires, which preceded, and the Mongol empire that succeeded it. Chapter 3. But who were these remarkable people? Remarkable as much by their power and achievements as by their conversion to a religion of outcasts? The descriptions that have come down to us originate in hostile sources and cannot be taken at face value. Quote, as to the Khazars, end quote, an Arab chronicler writes, quote, they are to the north of the inhabited earth towards the seventh clime, having over their heads the constellation of the plough. Their land is cold and wet. Accordingly, their complexions are white, their eyes are blue, their hair flowing and predominantly reddish, their bodies large, and their natures cold. Their general aspect is wild. End quote. Isn't that starting to give like what are the groups of the freaking aliens, dude? Like the Nordics or whatever? Whatever. Okay. And then the Kandahar giant, I know. Have y'all heard of that? Where like I think it was like during Desert Storm, some of the military guys like came across like a big ass red-haired giant, and I think they unalived it. Anyways, okay. So these people, now we've established that these Khazars, okay, who today are calling themselves God's chosen people, Yasharel, which they are not. They say they are Jews, but they, like Revelation 3:9 and 4:9 says, or 2:9 and 3:9, I'm sorry, says they're not. They're a synagogue of Satan. So, take that one up with Jesus, I guess. All right. After a century of warfare, and this was the whole point, is they are such a warlike people, and what has changed today? Except for now they just have more power because they have an organized, established, what was given to them by the British Crown Empire in 1948. Now do we see how this whole thing has started going, how it started forming? Because I know there's probably a lot of like younger people out there that don't know this history and probably don't even care. But like, y'all need to know this because this is who your enemy is, and this is who you're going to be like psychologically up against. The young ones need to come on to Auntie Erin's channel and listen to these dang books. Anyways, all right. So their general aspect was wild. We already went through that. Okay. After a century of warfare, the Arab writer obviously had no great sympathy for the Khazars. No, probably not, because they started trouble every fucking where they went, which is why they got kicked out of like 109, I think, countries and kingdoms. Anyways, nor had the Gregorian or Armenian scribes, whose countries had much older culture, had been repeatedly devastated by Khazar horsemen. A Georgian chronicle echoing an ancient tradition identifies them with the hosts of Gog and Magog. So all the little seasoned people now, what are you going to do with that? Because doesn't the Gog and Magog, or what I don't know. So are they the Gog and Magog people? We need to like post-it note that one, or like write it with a pen or something. Put a dot there. Go back to okay. We'll just remember beginning of chapter 3. All right, I'm gonna have to quit soon because I'm gonna run out of room. Okay, I think I can finish this. Okay. After a century of warfare, the Arab writer obviously had no great sympathy for the Khazars, nor had the Georgian or Armenian scribes, whose countries of much older culture had been repeatedly devastated by Khazar horsemen. A Georgian chronicle echoing an ancient tradition identifies them with the hosts of Gog and Magog. Quote, wild men with hideous faces and the manner of wild beasts, eaters of blood, end quote. An Armenian writer refers to the, quote, horrible multitude of Khazars with insolent, broad, lashless faces and long, falling hair like women, end quote. Lastly, the Arab geographer Istakri, one of the main Arab sources, has this to say. The Khazars do not resemble the Turks. They are black-haired and are of two kinds, one called the Kara Khazars, black Khazars, who are swarthy, verging on deep black as if they were a kind of Indian, and a white kind, Ak Khazars, who are strikingly handsome, end quote. This is more flattering, but only adds to the confusion, for it was customary among Turkish people to refer to the ruling classes or clans as white and to the lower strata as black. Thus, there is no reason to believe that the white Bulgars were whiter than the black Bulgars, or that the white Huns, the Eftalites, who invaded India and Persia in the 5th and 6th centuries, were of fairer skin than the other Hun tribes which invaded Europe. Istakri's black-skinned Khazars, as much as in his and his colleagues' writings, were based on hearsay and legend, and we are none the wiser regarding the Khazars' physical appearance or their ethnic origins. The last question can only be answered in a vague and general way, but it is equally frustrating to inquire as to the origins of the Huns, Alans, Avars, Bulgars, Magyars, Bashkirs, Burtas, Sabirs, Uyghurs, Saragurs, Onagurs, Udagurs, Kutragurs, Tarniaks, Kotragars, Kabars, Zabinders, Pechenegs, Gus, Kumans, Kipchaks, and dozens of other tribes are people who, at one time or another in the lifetime of the Khazar kingdom, passed through the turnstiles of those migratory playgrounds. Even the Huns, of whom we know much more, are of uncertain origin. Their name is apparently derived from the Chinese Yongnu, which designates warlike nomads in general, while other nations apply the name Hun in a similarly indiscriminate way to nomadic hordes of all kinds, including the, quote, white Huns mentioned above, the Sabirs, Magyars, and Khazars. And then there's a thing. It says, it's amusing to note that while the British in World War I used the term Hun in the same pejorative sense, in my native Hungary, school children were taught to look up to our glorious Hun forefathers with patriotic pride. An exclusive rowing club in Budapest was called Hunia, and Attila is a still popular first name. Okay, so anyways, that was just a little footnote. Okay, in the 1st century AD, oh, 1st century AD, that's awesome. The Chinese drove these disagreeable Hun neighbors westward and thus started one of the most periodic avalanches which swept for many centuries from Asia towards the west. From the 5th century onward, many of these westward bound tribes were called by the generic name of Turks. The term is also supposed to be of Chinese origin, which I said Asiatic, remember earlier, apparently derived from the name of a hill, and was subsequently used to refer to all the tribes who spoke languages with certain common characteristics, the Turkic language group. Thus the term Turk, in the sense in which it was used by medieval writers and often also by modern ethnologists, refers primarily to language and not to race. In this sense, the Huns and Khazars were Turkic people, and that says, but not the Magyars, whose language belongs to the Finno-Ugrian language group. Anyways, because that is another thing is Semitism is more associated with like language groups than like blood. You know what I mean? At a certain point. Okay, so it says all we can say. Okay, hold on. Okay. The Khazar language was supposedly a Shuvash dialect of Turkic, which still survives in the autonomous Shuvash Soviet Republic between the Volga and the Sura. The Shuvash people are actually believed to be descendants of the Bulgars who spoke a dialect similar to the Khazars. But all these connections are rather tenuous based on the more or less speculative deduction of Oriental philologists. All we can say with safety is that the Khazars were a Turkic tribe who erupted from the Asian steppes probably in the 5th century of our era. The origin of the name Khazar and the modern derivations to which it gave rise has also been the subject of much ingenious speculation. Most likely the word is derived from the Turkic root gaz, which means to wander, and simply means nomad. Of greater interest to the non-specialist are some alleged modern derivations from it among the Russian Cossack and the Hungarian Huszar, both signifying martial horsemen. And it says it is, oh, well, why would it do that? Anyways, okay. And also the German Ketzer, which means heretic, i.e. a J. If these derivations are correct, they would show that the Khazars had a considerable impact on the imagination of a variety of peoples in the Middle Ages. And isn't that interesting that they're having such a profound effect on the imaginations of the people of today? Dare I say, maybe even like to levels of indoctrination. Isn't it fascinating to just like read books and learn things? Anyways, I love you guys. I'm loopy as hell. I couldn't sleep last night, so I just decided, okay, I'll stay awake and try to like read a little bit. But I think I'm gonna officially lay down and go to sleep. It's probably, I don't know, like 8 in the morning or something. And I fell asleep, but I woke up in the middle of the night and blah, 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 blah. Anyways, thanks for listening, reading along with me. And yeah, Arthur Koestler, 13th tribe. Because remember, like from the Bible, there's like 12 tribes, but they've added themselves. And it seems they're also in the midst of like rewriting history. But we're not going to go too far deep into that. But, anyways, Aaron Mack, BS Detector. Love you guys. Mwah, mwah. Sub to the channel for more of me reading and reacting. Peace out.